Welcome back to the webcast. It's Friday, and that means college football picks. We got 3 top 25 matchups going into week 9. Let's go. Welcome back to the webcast. All sports, one web. Friday is college football picks. We do all of our picks here at the webcast through ESPN. So go ahead and make your account and pick along with us and see how you do throughout the season and compare with how we are doing as we go for number one overall across the field there. We got Tuesday NFL picks, Wednesday Premier League picks, and Friday is college football picks. So come and join us 7 p.m. on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, and get your picks in as well. Last week, we had Oregon with a outstanding victory over UCLA. Alabama bounced back. TCU continue winning ways there in the Big 12. A lot of great matchups. We got 3 top 25 matchups this week. So let's go ahead and dive into it with what is the match of the week, in my opinion. Not only in terms of number 2 versus number 13, the highest match or ranked matchup of the weekend, but in terms of overall college football playoff, Penn State bounced back last week with a win, but 2 weeks ago went up to Ann Arbor and took a beating, even though they were leading 17-16 there in the beginning of the third quarter against Michigan. Michigan was able to just run wild in that second half, over 400 yards rushing against a Penn State defense that was only allowing 80 yards per game on the ground going into it. So they are definitely going to look to bounce back in a big way this weekend. Good win against Minnesota at their whiteout game last week, but Ohio State is definitely going to be a different animal. And so let's start with this one. So Penn State, one win since 2012. That was that great matchup in Happy Valley in 2016. Saquon Barkley and the great whiteout night that was. They were able to get the win against the Buckeyes. But since then, not great sledding. Sean Clifford, obviously, when he was recruited by Penn State, said that he is coming here not to hang with Ohio State, but to beat the Buckeyes. He is 0-2 so far in his career. 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, just over 50% completion percentage as well. And, Michigan has one of the best offensive lines in the country. Minnesota had a great run game as well. And that's Penn State's bread and butter, is being able to stop the run. They weren't able to do it for 4 quarters against Michigan. They did it very well against Minnesota last weekend. We'll see if they can do it this week against Ohio State. Ohio State last week against Iowa ended up with a very comfortable 54-10 win over Iowa, who we know has a good defense, but is just so anemic on offense. It really hurts them to stay with teams as explosive as Ohio State. Over 4 quarters, Ohio State couldn't get the run game going early, and that was a problem. The game was close. Iowa even getting a sack, fumble, defensive touchdown to kind of take the lead early in that game last week. So we will see if Penn State, especially at home, can keep the run game for Ohio State limited. And if they can do that, and I think they give themselves a chance, Sean Clifford is going to come out swinging in his last matchup against Ohio State, especially with those words coming into it that he can, that he wants to be able to beat Ohio State. He hasn't done it so far. Let's see if he can do it his last time out. He's going to be trying to sling the ball all over the place. 52 pass attempts last year in Columbus, but now he gets to return home to Happy Valley. And we will see what they can do. But I think personally, the offense that Ohio State has, we saw what Justin Fields was able to do 2 years ago, 4 touchdowns there. Even CJ Stroud last year was able to get the pass game going there late in a comfortable win in the end for Ohio State there in Columbus last year. So for those reasons, I think Ohio State has too much offensive power for the Nittany Lions, even if they are home. It's big noon kickoff, so no whiteout late 7 p.m. game there in Happy Valley, which I think is really when their crowd gets behind them and is really the home field advantage. It's interesting. They had it last week for Minnesota. I think it would have meant a lot more to have it for this game. Usually Ohio State is the whiteout game for Penn State when they visit, but it was not the case this year. So Ohio State gets the win for us here at the webcast. Notre Dame traveling to the Dome to take on Syracuse, who last week had a great outing against Clemson, knocking out DJ Uyunglele on performance issues. I think they turned him over 3 times last week. They let up 19 unanswered to Clemson in the second half, plus a little bit in the first half there. So just over 30 minutes of game time. They were out. They let up 19 straight to Clemson. They weren't able to get on the board, and they only lost 27-21. So all 21 of their points put up before halftime against Clemson on the road. They get to return home with that defense and that atmosphere that is one of the best. They play very hard there up in New York. Notre Dame, on the other hand, is boasting a pretty decent defense when it comes to taking down the quarterback, top 26 in sacks going into this one. And that was what really was a big issue for Syracuse in that second half. They had that great first half against Clemson, but in the second half, they allowed 4 sacks. They got behind the chains. Garrett Schrader has over 2,000 yards of total offense running and throwing the ball for Syracuse. But when they get behind the chains, that is when they have issues, and sacks and penalties as well. But predominantly sacks in last week's game were a big issue in that second half. 4 sacks allowed. Really put them behind the ball. They couldn't get anything going. That's kind of what led to the 19 unanswered. Drew Payne, ever since he came in and became the starter there right after that Marshall loss halfway through that game, he is 4-1, including that great win away to the University of North Carolina there at Chapel Hill. 8 touchdowns, 1 interception in that time in his first 3 games after being the starter. It has gone down a little bit, but they do find themselves at 4-3 on the season. And I think they're going to move to 4-4, as Syracuse, I think, will be too much for them in the end. If Notre Dame can come out, get Schrader on the ground, get after him, get him pressured, prevent him from running outside the pocket, really contain him, force him to beat them with his arm, and even put them behind the chains on top of that, is going to be the way I think Notre Dame wins this game. But being at home, I think Syracuse will get it done and be too much for the Fighting Irish. College game day, traveling there to Alabama, Jackson State hosting the Southern Jaguars of Jackson, I believe, both from Jackson. And this one should be a great atmosphere. Coach Prime obviously bringing all the attention there to Jackson State. Over the last couple of years, they have been performing extremely well. I think 12-2 last year, undefeated going into this one. And I think with all of that limelight, Coach Prime will shine, and Jackson State will get the win there. Oklahoma State and Kansas State, another great matchup in the Big 12. The second game here of our top 25 matchups as number 9. Oklahoma State travels to 22 Kansas State. Big question mark going into this one is whether or not Adrian Martinez will be healthy for this. He got hurt after, I think, just like 2 passes last week against TCU, and the offense still performed well, especially in those first couple of quarters for Kansas State, but went 38 minutes with Will Howard to end that game without scoring any points. Will Howard offers a different problem for defenses than Adrian Martinez. Adrian Martinez can run and pass. He's very good with not turning over the ball. Adrian Martinez is 146 completions and no interceptions for Adrian Martinez. On the flip side, he doesn't score a lot of touchdowns through the air. Only 4 touchdowns for Adrian Martinez so far throughout this season, whereas Will Howard came into against TCU, threw 2 touchdowns himself, but did get an interception with only 13 completions there. So he is more of a pocket passer. He can run a little bit, but Adrian Martinez is the big reason why Kansas State can hold on to the ball, can make plays with his legs as well, especially converting there on third down. So it'd be very interesting to see whether or not they play. I think they have a better chance if Adrian Martinez plays because they do not turn over the ball. And Oklahoma State has been fantastic against the pass. They last week a great win there against Texas. They were able to keep Quinn Ewers to 19 for 49, 3 interceptions and 2 touchdowns for Quinn Ewers. A great win for Oklahoma State as they look to keep pace with TCU in the Big 12 atop the standings. Spencer Sanders has been fantastic this year for Oklahoma State, but he has struggled a little bit on the road versus Baylor and TCU. 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions total throughout those games. And they really died out in the second halves of those games, starting well. Both teams really start well and kind of struggled there late, especially for Oklahoma State on the road and Kansas State last week against TCU, even though we are talking about a very good TCU team. So for me, for this one, if Will Howard goes, I think Oklahoma State will win this comfortably. I think they'll cause too many problems for Kansas State on the defensive side of the ball. And I think Oklahoma State will just run away with this early and then kind of ride out a very big lead. If Adrian Martinez plays, I think this game is closer, but I still like Oklahoma State, what Sanders has been doing and that defense has been doing. I think they're going to keep on going, but I'm excited to see if Adrian Martinez plays because I think he gives Kansas State the best chance of winning. As we move now to Nebraska hosting the Fighting Illini, who sit top in total defense and are riding a 5-game win streak. They are representing the Big Ten West as they sit at 17 in the AP poll. Nebraska kind of rebounding after that terrible start. They find themselves 3-4. Casey Thompson last week, 16-29, 2 interceptions, 2 TDs versus Purdue. But Purdue is not even in the top 50 in terms of total defense, and the Fighting Illini sit at number 1 in the FBS. Best passing efficiency defense in the FBS. Sorry, not total defense. I'm sure they're up there as well, though, but passing efficiency. Nebraska is coming off of a bye, so that is helpful. But I think the defense for the Fighting Illini are going to cause too much problems for Casey Thompson and the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and they will get a win there. A great matchup, Cincinnati versus UCF, two of the teams that kind of really have been the powerhouses of the group of 5 over the last couple of years. UCF with that undefeated season. Cincinnati, a great performance last year. Sauce Gardner, Riddler there at quarterback as well for the Bearcats last year, took them to the playoff, a top 3 ranking in the AP poll. Currently, they sit at number 20, but they had to travel to Florida to take on the Golden Knights. But luckily for Cincinnati, they have I think top 3 in total sacks, led by Ivan Pace with 7, who leads the country in sacks. They're going to cause UCF so many problems on the defensive side of the ball there. UCF also ranks 73rd in sacks allowed. We saw them last weekend against Eastern Carolina. We also had them here on the ESPN picks for that one as they traveled to Eastern Carolina. They gave the ball away on their first 3 possessions, the third 2 interceptions and a turnover on downs. They found themselves down 17-0. Well, the lost Plumlee brother definitely plays better. John Plumlee, they're at home in Central Florida there. But I think the Bearcats will have too much for him, especially with the way that they can cause havoc, forcing Plumlee who is also a running quarterback. We said that very similar with Syracuse. If you can get after him, contain him, and force him to beat you with his arm or be behind the chains, I think that's going to cause a lot of problems. We saw that last week when he was in Eastern Carolina. Just out of sorts. I think they turned the ball over 4 times total in that game with Eastern Carolina's defense, and Cincinnati is a whole nother animal with Ivan Pace coming at you. So I got Cincinnati to win that one. The Battle of Missouri and South Carolina. South Carolina's find themselves at 5-2, ranked 25th in the AP poll. Spencer Rattler, after leaving Oklahoma, I was definitely expecting more of him to find a home here in South Carolina and kind of produce a little bit more. Brady Cook on the other end for Missouri, I would give him the edge over Spencer Rattler in this matchup, even though I do not think highly of either quarterback. They combined for like an average of a QBR of 46, which is, I think, would rank outside the top 90 in FBS quarterbacks. So not very good between the both of them performance-wise. Really, the highlight of Missouri season was a couple of weeks ago, keeping it close with Georgia, I think, winning there in the beginning of the fourth quarter before Georgia kind of came back, I think 10 points to end that game to get the victory over Mizzou. And so for that reason, I'm just going to give South Carolina the win at home, keep their good season going at 5 to improve to 6-2. As we move to probably the second matchup I'm looking forward to after Ohio State, Penn State, which is Kentucky traveling to Tennessee. Kentucky, obviously, getting back Will Levis is huge. He came back last week from his foot injury as they were able to beat Mississippi State. And I think they're a whole different team with him in the ball game, similar to Adrian Martinez, where they're able to hold the ball. Will Levis doesn't turn the ball over very much, and Kentucky can hold possession, which is really great against high-powered teams, except Tennessee. And the reason why is because Tennessee not only ranks first in the country in points per game at 50.1 points per game, but Hendon Hooker is playing at a Heisman level. And with that core of wide receivers, they, especially like Hyatt, we saw what he could do against Alabama, but they're averaging 11.6 yards per attempt. So they can score on you in a hurry. They were averaging 18.3 yards per reception. Tennessee was against Alabama in that 52-49 win a couple weeks ago. Last week, they got a very comfortable win over UT Martin. I couldn't even tell you what conference UT Martin is a part of. So we're going to treat that almost as a bye week for them. Great tune-up here to prepare for Kentucky coming into Tennessee. And I think, Kentucky, the ability to hold the ball and their defense has been a big reason why they are 5-2 so far this year. Obviously, losing when Will Levis was out, so really we can treat this as a 5-1 record overall. And they haven't let up more than 24 points this entire season, and even parts of last season going back to, guess what, when they played Tennessee and Hendon Hooker there in Lexington. Now they have to travel to Knoxville to take on Tennessee, who will boast 7-0 record, sit third in the AP poll. The one thing going for Kentucky maybe in this one is the fact that Tennessee has to play Georgia next week. Are they getting a little bit ahead of themselves? Maybe looking forward to that game and overlook Kentucky. Maybe Kentucky can keep it closer, but I think with how fast Tennessee can score, it doesn't really matter how much of the ball Kentucky has. They're going to need to score more than their season average of 26 points, which sits 82nd in the FBS. That is half of what Tennessee scores per game. And Tennessee has played some good competition so far this season, as in Alabama. And so I think Tennessee can put up points in a hurry. So I like Tennessee at home in this one. Ole Miss at 7-1, taking on Texas A&M. Who, Texas A&M, you have good performances and bad performances. Obviously, they have such a great recruitment class. I think they put the best recruitment class last year in the history of college football. They are going to be suspending 3 of those great freshmen for this game. And they sit at 3-4. Their season is already over there in the SEC West. Many had them touted as the team to challenge Alabama there for the SEC West this year with all the great job recruiting that they have done. Ole Miss sitting at 7-1 is the true contender there in the SEC. And so I will be giving Ole Miss a win. I just don't know what to expect from Texas A&M. Maybe they can show up there at home, but we've seen what Appalachian State was able to do to go in there and put up points and get the win. I expect Ole Miss to do the same. Stanford sitting at 3-4 on the year, travel to UCLA, who have returned back to LA, back to the Rose Bowl with their tail between their legs after a humbling game there up in Eugene against Oregon. Oregon and Bo Nix are for real, getting better every single week. UCLA will look to bounce back against Stanford, and I think that they will improve to 7-1, keep pace there in the Pac-12, and really make that interesting there at home. And there you have it. We take our 34-25 record into week 9, and there are our 10 picks. So get your picks in here at ESPN Pick'em and see if you can catch up to us as we look to crack the top 100,000 here and keep pushing for number 1. Super excited that week 9 in college football, we are approaching next week. The College Football Playoff Committee will release their first rankings, which is super exciting. We are going to give you our rankings here on the webcast as well, our top 4 teams each week going on after or starting next Friday, going into week 10 in the college football season as we approach the end of conference play, getting ready for the conference championship games, and then the playoff. It will wrap up super quick here. We also have begun our World Cup series here on the webcast, so we will be dropping that video later on today and keep you up to date with all things World Cup as we are 23 days away from the World Cup, and we are going to give you everything you need to know about the U.S. men's national team and get you hyped and ready to go for the best sporting tournament in the world, the FIFA World Cup, starting in late November here. So stick with us, enjoy the sporting weekend. We also got the World Series starting tonight, Houston hosting the Philadelphia Phillies. Fun fact about that game, it is the second largest win differential between World Series opponents. It goes back, I think, until 1906. So the second largest win differential, but we'll see if the Philadelphia Phillies can pull it off like the White Sox did in 1906 with that point, the win differential. So please enjoy the sporting weekend, a lot of great matchups, and we will see you on Tuesday for our NFL edition here at the webcast.